Hi all. Can you hear me, Abby? You can hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Yeah, so I'm going to be presenting along with my colleague Sophie, who will you'll see in a moment. Thanks, Dan. We wanted to build on what Dan was talking about by getting into some of the specifics on California statewide propositions. And so just by way of introduction, my name is Sari Billick. I work for Human Impact Partners. And we'll say more about what Human Impact Partners is. I'm the senior public health organizer. And as my role there, I coordinate along with Sophie all of our advocacy and organizing work, as well as Public Health Awakened, which is a national network of public health professionals. We'll say more about all of that later. I also just wanted to say a little bit about my background for this group is before I was at Human Impact Partners in the 2016 election, I was working on a statewide campaign for a California proposition. And then before that, I was working for, as a union organizer for AFSCME 3299, which folks may know is one of the many unions that represents workers at all the UCs, including at UCLA. And so I was specifically working with workers at UCSF, but working statewide on campaigns with AFSCME. So, you know, have a connection to the UCs and there. I will turn it over to Sophie to introduce herself and a little bit more about Human Impact Partners.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sari, and thank you, everybody, for having us. We're really honored to join today and to be invited. And so by way of introducing myself, I'm Sophie Simon-Ortiz. I work with Sari in our advocacy and organizing work at Human Impact Partners. We're based in Oakland, but we do national work, although much of our advocacy work is California-wide. And so we're happy to speak with all of you today about some of that work. I came to public health by way of community organizing and digital storytelling work. And before, excuse me, before my current role at HIP, I was public health faculty at San Francisco State University up here in the Bay. I wanted to say too, I really enjoy working with clinician advocates in particular, because it reminds me of someone who was a major inspiration for me in going into this work, who was my grandfather, who was a practicing MD, primarily in Arizona, but he also, while practicing, engaged in a lot of policy advocacy work around a number of issues that most impacted his patients' lives. Once he saw those play out on an individual level in his clinic, most of his patients were Mexican and Mexican-American farm workers in Arizona. And so that was really a big part of his work and something that's really inspired me in getting into this work. And so if you could go to the next slide, Evan, thank you. So just briefly about Human Impact Partners, through advocacy, organizing, and capacity building work, which is our way of saying our work within public health departments, as well as research, we aim to transform the field of public health to center equity and build collective power with social justice movements. These are the main kind of issue areas that we do work around. So the criminal legal system, economic security, immigration justice, housing, and land use and transportation. If you go to the next slide, please. So through our work, we really try and expand beyond the kind of dominant narrative of what creates health in the US and worldwide, which I'm sure many of you were all very familiar with, which is this idea that the individual is solely responsible for health, and that all we need, you know, is good genes, good access to healthcare, good behavior like eating well and exercising, and that's ultimately what shapes our health. And if you go to the next slide, please. We instead, I'm sure like many of you, including this work that you're inviting us into today, couch our work instead within the social determinants of health framework, which again, I'd imagine many of you are already familiar with, so I won't spend too much time on this. I've also seen this described as the structural determinants of health, which I also really like, and then more recently, the moral determinants of health, which has come out of some of the work resisting some of the responses to COVID and the inequities there. But really, you know, just to name this, what it's really about, like Dan also really explained, that our health is very much shaped by our social, environmental, and economic context, and the experiences that communities especially face where there's inequitable health because people have historically and presently continued to not experience equal or equitable access to the key resources that make us healthy. So stable housing, good wages and safe workplaces, clean air, access to outdoor green space to use, and not experiencing discrimination as a result of who we are. And of course, we see so many health inequities so glaringly exposed by COVID-19 at this time. So we're really glad that the social determinants of health narrative has been taking hold more and more across the health field. And we definitely believe in its truth. And then we also seek to go a little bit further. So if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So we really believe that we have to look at what drives the inequities in the first place in the social or structural determinants of health. So our theory of change at HIP is that these are driven by an unequal distribution of power between communities, which are maintained by different systems of advantage and oppression, marginalization, and that given that there are racial inequities in every system across the board, that it's really these power imbalances that we have to shift at their root. Rather than addressing each individual issue area, although that's important as well as we continue our work. And so our positions on several of the key propositions that we'll share about today, which isn't comprehensive, and we'll speak about that in a minute, really reflect our commitment to health equity and making these kind of structural changes and shifts in power ultimately that we really believe and want to bring everyone into this belief that that these are the kind of changes that we need to support good health for all Californians, for everyone in the United States, worldwide, today and well into the future. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sari, who will kick off highlighting some of our proposition stances.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. As Sophie mentioned, we're just going to talk about a few statewide propositions today. There's obviously a lot more than we're going to talk about and that we have time for, but we just chose to highlight a few. We also have a slightly more extensive voter guide that we'll share with you at the end. And so you can go to the next slide. So just to start out, I wanted to talk about Proposition 15. So as a little bit of background, for the past 42 years, since 1978, large corporations like Chevron and Disney and many, many others have been using commercial property tax loopholes to avoid paying their fair share of property taxes. This has led to massive underfunding of schools, local governments, and community services. And in the past 42 years, for example, our schools have gone from being one of the highest funded in the country to being one of the lowest funded school systems in the country. So Prop 15, if passed, would raise $12 billion per year for schools and local communities by reassessing commercial properties at their current value and making corporations pay their fair share. It also protects homeowners, renters, small business, and agriculture who are not included. And so this won't affect residential property taxes. It will only affect large commercial properties. It has exceptions built in for small businesses. We know, as you know, Sophie was talking about social determinants of health, we know that education, housing, and good jobs are some of the most important social determinants of health. And decades of disinvestment in public health infrastructure has weakened our public health system, making the COVID-19 crisis even worse, and we're having to fight it even harder. If you could go to the next slide. So if Prop 15 passes, 30% of the funds will go directly to schools to fill critical gaps in budgets. The rest, the other 70%, will go to local governments. And so in Los Angeles County, Prop 15 would reinvest $3.7 billion a year, and $1.2 billion of that would go towards public education, and the other $2.5 billion would go towards community services. So this graphic that you see here is an infographic that we created, and I'm showing you the Los Angeles County one, but there's other infographics for other counties if you're interested. I included the website where you can find those. But according to we did some calculations talking with community organizers about what is most needed in LA County, and looking at that number of 2.5 billion going to community services, we did some calculations that show that Los Angeles could build 4,000 units of affordable housing and provide emergency rental assistance to 10,000 more people. It could cover the cost of 15,000 people to receive healthcare at community clinics, and it could provide free childcare for 7,500 essential workers, in addition to other things. You can see that there. So I'd really encourage you, if you want to like dig into this more, go to that website and you can see other counties that we have similar graphics for. So as Los Angeles County faces a looming budget crisis, this initiative would mean more support for public health workers, for teachers, and many more. For every county in the state would benefit from that. We simply can't afford corporate tax loopholes at the expense of these investments in our health and well-being. Public health claims just 3 cents of every health dollar spent in the country, and meanwhile, corporations in California are using a property tax loophole to avoid paying their fair share, and resources are being drained from community health clinics, emergency responders, and from schools. It's critical, particularly in the middle of a public health crisis, that we invest in the social, economic, and environmental conditions that keep us healthy, such as quality education, social services, and thriving communities. And we believe that Prop 15 is an opportunity to do that. I'm going to pass it on to Sophie to talk about the next one.
Thanks, Sari. If you could go to the next slide, please, Evan. Thank you. So we are a strong, adamant yes on Prop 17 as well, which would return voting rights to the over 50,000 Californians who are currently on parole. So we believe that racial justice means, and health justice as an extension, means really reckoning with the fact that disenfranchisement is a project of structural racism. And that voting itself is a form of power that directly affects community wellness. We know, for example, from research that that people who have better self-rated health overall in states with more equality in voting participation. Numerous studies show that the act of voting itself is associated with better health because of its association with a greater perception of self-efficacy and agency, so power over one's immediate surroundings, and then by extension in decisions that directly impact their communities. So if you think about which communities are most disproportionately impacted and harmed by incarceration, communities of color, low-income communities, it becomes really clear why this form of power and feeling belonging in our communities and a sense of direct impact on our communities is really clear. So this proposition has widespread support among many elected officials across the state, community organizations, and advocates, and also is polling well in the public. And the LA Times also has officially endorsed it. And so rather than me telling you more, I'd like to play a very quick video of for you to hear firsthand the real impacts of passing Prop 17 as told by Paul Martinez, who's someone who would be directly impacted positively by its passage. So Evan, if you don't mind going to that video, that'd be awesome. Is that possible, or should I try to?
I think I should be able to do it. Give me one.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Just takes a couple of clicks.
No problem. Thank you.
It feels as if I'm not a citizen of this country, and it feels like I have no voice or no say in my surroundings, in my life, in my community. It gives you a sense of not having value. And it makes me wonder, what type of citizen am I? A half citizen, quarter citizen? So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
And what would it mean to you to be able to vote, have your voting rights restored?
It would give me back some dignity. It would serve to let me know that second chances in America are for everybody, and that I am now a part of the society fully. The same society that wants me to reintegrate and be successful on parole. It feels as if I'm not a citizen of this.
Great, thank you so much, Evan. So with that, I will pass it back over to Sari to talk about Prop 22.
Oops. Yeah, and we can just pull up the Prop 22 slide while I start talking. That would be great. Prop 22, we are opposing Prop 22 and encouraging a no vote. Prop 22 creates a loophole in existing law to allow app-based companies to continue exploiting their workers for profit. Prop 22 would deny paid sick leave, disability insurance. Prop 22 would deny app-based drivers for Lyft and Uber and other companies the benefits that are required under current law, for example, paid sick leave, disability insurance, and health insurance. It would also reduce drivers' guaranteed wages to only $5.64 an hour, which, as you know, is well below minimum wage. Prop 22 would mean below minimum wages for these essential workers, which would have widespread negative impacts on the health and well-being of drivers, their families, and our broader communities. Prop 22 was put on the ballot and is fully funded by Lyft, Uber, and a few other app-based companies who want to carve out exceptions for themselves in current law to keep their profits higher and to not have to provide basic benefits that we all deserve. So we know that income and health are entwined closely, and we need economic security to thrive, successfully manage stress, and prevent disease. We know that a family's income directly impacts their ability to meet their basic needs, and jobs that don't offer livable wages force families to choose between paying rent, buying healthy foods, and seeking healthcare. Family income also affects kids' school readiness and achievement. Children are more likely to do well in school and stay in school longer when their family has a higher, more livable income. Higher income is associated with, and I know you all know this, but higher income is associated with living longer, as well as protection against chronic diseases like diabetes, kidney disease, liver disease, heart disease, hypertension, and stroke. And as income rises, birth outcomes also improve. Some researchers have promoted the idea that low wages should be considered an occupational health hazard due to the impact that low wages play in total worker health. So based on what we know about the links between economic security and health, it's critical that we vote no on Prop 22, which would deny workers living wages, stability, and access to benefits that keep our communities healthy. So if you can go to the next slide. So we only got to talk about 3 of the props today, but this is our full voter guide, which again does not include all of the props that are on the ballot. It just includes 6 of them, and we talked about 3 today. So today we talked about a yes on Prop 15, a yes on Prop 17, and a no on Prop 22. If you want to check out our full voter guide, at the bottom, the link at the bottom, humanimpact.org/CA voter guide 2020, you can see our full voter guide, which has descriptions for each one and specifically talking about how each proposition and our position relates to health. So please do check that out. And as Dan mentioned, there's lots of other voter guides out there that you can look at as well for recommendations on other things that we didn't specifically choose positions on. And can you go to the next slide? So lastly, I just wanted to share about our network, Public Health Awakened. So Human Impact Partners coordinates a group, Public Health Awakened. We're a national network of public health professionals that's organizing around health, equity, and justice. We put out action-oriented resources. We have a listserv where people share ideas and actions. We encourage people to take action on all different issues. So I'd encourage folks to join. If you go to this website listed here, publichealthawaken.org/join, you can sign up to join our network. We also have a local chapter of Public Health Awakened in LA, and I'd encourage folks to join that. Actually, the LA chapter later today should be releasing their own voter guide, which actually has more recommendations than the Human Impact Partners one, as well as a few local LA ones. So that should be up on our website soon. You can keep an eye out for that. If you join our network, you'll hear more updates about our broader national election work that we're working on. So encourage folks to join our network. I also just included our 2 Twitter handles on there for both Public Health Awakened and Human Impact Partners, where we're sharing a lot of our work and our resources and things around the elections as well. So please do join us, and that's all we have.